Welcome, Dada. Thank you so much for being with me today. We have with us Dr. Saptarishi Basu, who is an expert in Indian history and has been teaching that for the last 30 years. We heard a statement by Rahul Gandhi yesterday about him not hearing or even studying about the tribal history or even, let's say, about the revolution that was started by, let's say, SC, ST, and OBC today. Uh, so I was very eager to have Dr. Basu talk about this because as far as I am concerned, most of the things that I've learned in life has been through Dr. Basu only. He's been my political guru, I would say. So, Dada, welcome, and I would like to have your word on this particular issue.
Thanks for the opportunity, Pravinji. As you see, Mr. Rahul Gandhi's utterances are doctored and instructed from outside interests. So whatever he speaks or whatever he utters is of nothing of social significance for the betterment of nation, but it is to the contrary. Now, let us analyze what he said, why he said, because what he is practicing is identity politics, which is designed for the fragmentation or balkanization of India. Now, the very fact that he's trying to create a rift or an us and they between the general class or the so-called caste within quotes and create a understanding that those who doesn't belong to that class of 40% of Hindus, they are the so-called oppressed within quotes Dalit class, and they need to either take revenge or take their rights from others and things like that. He's trying to create a class war. The concept of class struggle as being taught in the dialectic materialism, extreme communism. So he's trying to implement that. Now going back to how we can, and it's a kind of cognitive warfare which he has launched on the nation, being the traitor he is. Now let's go to the substance and the topic, which is the contribution of the tribals in the Indian freedom struggle. Now, if we see the very fact of how the Indian legislation came about after the tribals, after the movement of the after the Sepoy immunity, when the company Raj was essentially dissolved. After the Battle of Plassey, which took at 1857, which was won due to poor strategic performance by Siraj-ud-Dowla's forces, tactical mistake of not keeping their gunpowder dry, and the tripartite agreement and betrayal of Mir Jafar, the British Raj entered the fray of political dominance as along with the trade dominance in the eastern sector, which was previously dominated by French from Chandannagar. And they decided to avenge all their hatred against the Indians, which they had due to the Child's War and the Battle of Dungeon. And also later on, these kind of things. So they started our loot and reprisal. If you see the first people who rose up in the first war of independence, which is never mentioned due to correct political reason, that is the Anandamath, where the Sannyasi revolution. Now, let us be very, very careful that the Sannyasi revolution doesn't basically talk about any sect as Brahmin or upper classes. It is to all people who are deemed as sannyasis or who are deemed to have basically left the worldly realm of earning bread and butter for themselves. The Baul movement in India, or the Bairagi or the Borgi movement, which was there very much in the Vaishnav sect, was an all-encompassing sector where all the classes of society, including the Shudras and the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins, the entire cross-section of the society was into that. And it was and the lineage was taken from the Vanapastha or the ashrams of Hindu society. So those people who were not interested or had faculties for making trade or let us say employment in the king's court or otherwise, would what will happen? They would basically go for that sannyasi. तो क्या हो गया कि वहां पे जो पूरा समाज था, that had the sannyasis had a put cross section. And then, due to the extreme reprisal and meal, indigo farming and other and progressive poisoning of the farmland, the agricultural production started reducing. And also, Britain was food deficient, so they started exporting food grains at huge amount, leaving very little for the farmers. So the farmers who were initially happy, I must put this in context, they were happy after getting rid of Sirajud-Dowla. They started getting impoverished and the hunger started. So the people know of only one, let us say, uh, let us say, hunger, death, or a pandemic which has happened in Bengal. Actually, there are three. The first one started and the Anandamath came into existence. If anybody has read Bankim Chandra's Anandamath, it gives a vivid description how people are dying out of hunger and let us say pestilence and communicable diseases, which is and malnutrition, out of which the Bairagis or the saints, they could not stay aloof and they started contributing, and that was the first war of independence. Now, this first war of independence was moved out of the history of the entire British dominance because they said that it was the company as a private interest. Nobody is talking about that. Only one person from Congress who should have been the leader, he was little literate, Mr. Shashi Tharoor. He has written two books, The Inglorious Empire, and another is I think something, that two good books he has written about the British. And William Dalrymple has also talked a lot about the British Raj and exploitation. So the entire civilization population was against them. And if you see the rise from that time, these sannyasi movements put such amount of fear into the minds of the British that they decided in a all-out sabotage and subversion of any devotee movement in the hinterland in the east. And that is why they had spies like Raja Ram Mohan Roy starting Brahmo Samaj, and then some our so-called Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar going for Vidwa Vibha, an anti-Brahminical movement, and the other, that movement, this movement. All these were British-sponsored movement in order to subvert a deeply religious society, Hindu society, which was focused on basically reclaiming their culture and their saving their honor. Now, since that was happening, it was not related only to the upper classes. If you see the Zamindar clan, they were not from the upper classes. To be very precise, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas were not there. They were the Kayasthas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras who were very much there. Das, Mitras, and other people were having Zamindar. And some of them become, it was only the amount of, let us say, amount of favor you can do, or amount of let us say sycophancy you can afford to the Raj, you were getting your realm. So those people were wealthy up. So their society was no longer or could never be stratified in terms of religion or caste. At that time, it was economically stratified heavily towards the lower caste because they were having the capability of production. Let us, whether it be oil, whether it be leather, whether it be metals, whether it be any kind of daily utility substances, they were having the production rights, and hence the very concept of them being impoverished doesn't make sense. The entire cross-section of the society had revolted. And then they started all sorts of revolt, like the Kamal and Roti revolt. Now, who are the kind of people who are making rotis and distributing to each other? Definitely cannot be the Brahmins, because he goes for alms and cooks, let us say, does Trikal Sandhya and does OBC in his home. He cooks boiled food.
I have
So it is the lower caste
one
people.
question here, दादा. ये जो रोटी और कमल वाला था, ये जो रिवोल्ट पूरा हुआ था और ये जो मूवमेंट एक प्रकार से चला था, was it not just because of what the British were doing during this particular period, or was it just because of the policies of the economic policies, the revenue, the taxation policies that the British were actually imposing on the Indian continent from 1770 onwards?
Now, I'll give you a very clear perspective. 1757, after the fall of Sirajuddaula to 1857. Initially, what was the status in 1757? The entire eastern plain, right from the Delhi Sultanate till the gates of Assam or the Homgam Parishad, we were Darul Islam. We had a complete Sharia law, Sharia court with muezzins and courts. And the Hindus were progressively being marginalized by two dangerous taxations. One is called jizya and second is called kharaj. And there is a third taxation as well, which was a countervailing trade taxation against our traders in shipping, which was slowly killing the Indian mercantile marine. So there was the three types of taxation was very much there. And these taxations were to the tune that the Hindus were being looted and the Muslim population were becoming something like the Roman gentry and the other captured slaves. If you read Premchand's Shatranj Ke Khiladi, and if you see what the people of Lucknow was doing at that time, you will get a glimpse that the general Muslim population, which were non-producing, they were so much into debauchery that they had gone in for ganjifa, or what we in Premchand's word, marijuana addiction, playing shatranj during the daytime, seeing cock and bull fight and other kind of things. Like you had this cock and bull term, it came from the Lucknow's style, where cocks and bulls were fighting with each other, and people were whiling their time away because they had nothing productive to do. It only happens when you have enough stocked at your home and you have nothing, you have not worked for it. So if you see the opening chapter of Munshi Premchand, you will understand the plight of the Hindu people. Now, coming from that, in 1757, Sirajuddaulla's excesses and the departure of Ali Bardi Khan when he murdered the last Nawab of the son of Shaista Khan, who was the governor of Bengal in Asab the son, and he became Nawab. And then a battle enraged between Aurangzeb and Bengal through detachment of boats and all, where he finally did not give up his suzerainty, but he accepted the overlordship of the Mughal Empire and decided to pay them tributes. But even that tribute used to come from Hindus only. Let us be very precise. So by the time Sirajuddaulah came to the throne, he was a religious bigot and a zealot of infinite proportion, and he was basically a vile, pervert person also, creating extreme torment and torture on Hindus. He had a pathological hatred of the Hindu religion, and to the tune of Alexander the idol breaker, Sikandar Bhut-Kishan. He was actively involved in basically decimating the Hindu population's places of worship, so much so that a trader who was very much wealthy and did not want to participate in politics, Jagat Seth, he decided to sign a tripartite agreement with Robert Clive through an emissary called Chand, who was one of the traders who was working for Jagat Seth and who was his, Jagat Seth was a banker. Right. And Chand was a trader, so he used to have a what we say vyavahar or financial relation with him. So he dispatched Chand to talk to this fellow, Robert Clive, made a secret meeting, and then Mir Jafar, the biggest general and uncle of Sirajuddaulah, was called, and a tripartite meeting was made. It is on that guarantee of the meeting that the crown allowed 300 soldiers to go and meet Sirajuddaulah in battle. Sorry, 1100 soldiers. Why? Because the Battle of Dungeon by Sirajuddaulah had put such fear in the heart of British, and before that Aurangzeb's torturous siege of Bombay, which had seen 80% of the population of Bombay decimated and died due to starvation, had taught British the rule that don't play around with the Muslims ruler, they're extremely barbaric. Now, these conditions, they had only given 1100 soldiers. Now the defeat happens. So Hindus initially thought, my bad days are over. Now I will not have kharaj, I will not have jizya, I will not have my woman taken by Khan and have the first night of wedding to be slept by the Khan. This is what was happening to us. The right of first night in the entire continent of subcontinent was being observed by the Mughal rulers. It was an ultimate testament to humiliation which was being wreaked upon the Hindu population. Such was the rage. So Bengalis welcomed the British in the initial phase. Now what happened? The taxation initially reduced from 90% to 70% to 30%. Let me be very, very specific. The immediate rise of the Hindu population and the development of Bengal started moment the British came, not because they were superior rulers, only because they put the taxation to 2 times what was there in Britain. Britain was up to 10% taxation or 20% taxation by the crown. They developed 30% taxation. They thought that we are looting, but they had no idea that we were used to being looted to 90%. So, so even after 30% taxation, farmers were damn happy. Okay, we have sufficient to eat. And Bengal started prospering like it became a very, very big revenue state. And it sparked the growth of the empire building machine of British, and all the capital ships of Britain started being built in the Murshidabad shipyards. And Chattogram, the village of Chatterjees or Chattopadhyayas, they became the shipwrights and they started designing ships. But as this thing will happen, the company became more and more corrupt and hidden. They started looting and they said that we don't need all this food. We need to wear white clothes. So make them cultivate indigo. Now, indigo is something that we never wanted to cultivate because it was a weed and it was a poisonous food. And it was made to be cultivated in one of the most fertile delta Ganges. Now, what that did, so farmers were the villages were called revenue villages. If you see William Adams' statement before Thomas Babington Macaulay's disposition in the upper Lord of House, they used to say, I have traveled the length and breadth of the country and there was not a beggar. So how was that possible? Because everybody used to eat of his own. Now, if you make them plant indigo, a substance which is only valuable for the British, our local economy has no use of indigo. It was totally waste for the Indian population because we liked colored clothes and we had no fascination for white clothes. The white clothes was basically a Christian dominion, and that is the reason you still have that white band in the Indian flag. The top belongs to Hindu, the middle belongs to Christian, third one belongs to Islam, and the center there is the Dhamma Chakra belonging to the Buddhist. That is how our Indian flag has been a piece of compromise, meaning no offense to the flag itself, people die for it. But that is how the things have come. Now, coming back to our concept of what is the contribution of Hindus and the scheduled caste, the entire, let us say, cultivation and the farmers, which class that did they belong to? They were the so-called, within quotes, Dalits. And the people who used to revolt, who were they? They were the so-called Dalits. So people who were the farmers, the traders, the weavers, the people who were having oil traders, anybody, fishermen, they belong to that class only. Machwaras, Telis, Lohars, Bangis, and all that so-called, which is called the cuss words. These are no longer, they were the name of the trades which people were having and people were earning through that. These are the people who are actually paying the tax. A Brahman who is teaching in a Gurukul, what is his earning and how can he pay tax? He is not a producer. So if you are not producing, you are not selling, you are not paying tax, you are earning out of beggary, technically speaking. So Brahman was not paying tax anyway. So he was supposed to be impoverished, and that is what he was. Okay, now you are running a Gurukul which runs from student donation. So it was a charitable institution. So in history of anywhere, charitable institution except from Islam, nobody taxes. Even Britishers were not taxing charitable institutions. So technically speaking, the tax was being given by the lower caste. It is these people whom after the loot, they started getting impoverished to British policies and their trade policies when they started chopping off the hand of the weavers. Who were the weavers? They are the Julahas. Can name one Julaha leader from the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya community. They were either Muslims or extremely Ati Dalits, so-called Ati Dalits, and they were very much Hindus. So the Julahas they were weaving, and it was their muslin which was priced at the rate of gold, their weight in gold, which could be packed in a machis ka dibbi, as they used to say. The entire sari could be packed in a matchbox and could pass through a ring finger, and which was being extremely valued by the Europeans because that semi-transparent, let us say, lingerie which the European women used to wear to entice their husbands' desire was of extreme value, and people were buying it in droves from Roman times almost.
So, Dada, I would
Who
like,
were these Julahas?
I would just like to, while you were saying all this, I had one thing that struck my mind was whenever you read about these Dalits, Lohars and all, none of the books or none of the notes or none of the papers that have mentioned these people talk about them being Dalits. But now, since after the independence, or let's say after the process of balkanization had started and the process is still on, now they're talking about Dalits, but they don't mention that these people were actually the Dalits.
Now, what does the word Dalit means? Dalit means impoverished. So, according to their definition of impoverization, who will be the Dalits of today? Let us start the Bata, the Tata, the Adanis, the, let us say, all the oil producers, edible oil companies, Ashirvad Atta,
Let's
and
not,
let us say industrial farming.
let's not miss your Bengal, Dada, Sri Leathers.
Three leathers. So all these
We are not
people
advertising any
who
of
are,
them. Yeah.
whom we call business conglomerates,
Yeah.
whom we call the states of today, they are supposed to be the Dalits. Now you can very well imagine the distortion or inversion of fact. If you have the center of production in any economy, whatever goods India was selling, who were manufacturing the goods? Who were the farmers?
The Dalits?
The Kshatriyas were doing farming.
No, never.
The Brahmins were doing farming.
No, never. They could never do that.
The Vaishyas were doing trading, no farming. They were artis. Straight away, they were artis then, they were artis now. So the farmer he was always from the Shudra, and he has surplus for his own home. He has seed of his own. He was so knowledgeable that he used to manufacture his seed.
जब ये शास्त्रों में कहा जाता है कि शूद्र सनातन की रीढ़ की हड्डी है, तो ये बात 100% सही है।
भाई खाना और समाज की सारी जरूरत की चीजें कौन बनाता? अब यहाँ पे ब्राह्मण को मस्तिष्क क्यों बोला गया है? मस्तिष्क में एनर्जी नहीं जाती, पेट में आपका खाना रहता है। देखिए क्या है, हमारा शरीर जिस तरीके से बना है, द बॉडी बेसिकली इज एन एम्बॉडीमेंट ऑफ ए परफेक्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन थ्रू क्रॉस फंक्शनल टीम। जिसके पास सबसे ज्यादा एनर्जी का स्टोर है, जो सबसे ज्यादा खाना बनाता है, वो खुद सबसे कम खाता है। आपका खाना बनाता है आपका स्टमक, आपका लीवर और आपका लार्ज एंड स्मॉल इंटेस्टाइन, और वेस्ट बेचारा लार्ज इंटेस्टाइन ही निकालता है जिसका साइज सबसे बड़ा है। अब कल को अगर हम वेस्ट रेक्टम से लेकर लार्ज इंटेस्टाइन अपने आप को दलित घोषित कर दे, आपके शरीर का क्या होगा? आपका स्टमक बोले बेटा मेरा सारा खाना तो मैं बनाता हूँ, सारा एडिनो सारा मैं जूस मैं निकालता हूँ फूड का, अब मैं दूसरे का साथ शेयर नहीं करूंगा तो शरीर का क्या होगा? The very concept of this Dalitization or this thing is the utter nonsense of, let us say, Joshua Project and identity politics, because Europeans were used to that.
Dada,
See, Europeans.
Dada, I would like you to actually speak about the Joshua Project, because what I would say is what I have seen mostly is ये 10 में से 9.5 लोगों को इस प्रोजेक्ट के बारे में मालूम ही नहीं। In fact,
I will come to that once I just finish with the contribution of the so-called Shudras and Dalits in the freedom struggle. So if you see any kind of crime or any incident occurs because of a motivation factor. So if you see what was the British taxation doing, what was the trade practices doing, what were the merchants guild doing, what was the banks doing? So with the British people came the entire collapse of the Hindu banking system, which was temple centered. Now it started the government banks. So who lost the money power? Definitely the Sevayaks and the merchants lost. Brahmins were still being fed by the village and he was doing his ritual. So he was a Karam Kandi Brahman. Even if you see any of the Pandas who were there, they had an accountant and they were basically only administrative capacity of fund managers. If you go to any of the mutts or let us say temples even today and you see a Sevat, does the Purohit or the head priest have a BMW or let us say electric convertible? Have you ever seen that? But you will see the temple having funds more than a state-owned bank. And this is the system where things were always there, the way it was being administered even in ancient India. सो ये भी यहाँ पे कोई कहानी बोले कि बेचारा ब्राह्मण ने सबको चूस के रख लिया, भाई करेगा क्या लेके, कहाँ से चूसेगा भाई? उसके टैक्स वो कलेक्ट करता था क्या? टैक्स तो राजा कलेक्ट करता
दादा,
था
ये
स्टेट
ये
के
जो
लिए।
आपने कहा ना, इससे मुझे एक बहुत बड़ी प्यारी सी चीज याद आती है कि जब भी कोई उपन्यास, ये जो लेफ्ट विंगर से उपन्यास लिखा हुआ पढ़ते थे ना, तो पहला लाइन होता था कि एक गांव में एक दरिद्र ब्राह्मण रहता था। उसके बाद
हाँ, तो अगर ब्राह्मण ने
और
एक्सप्लॉइट किया
और दूसरे
और
दूसरे
दलितों को
पैराग्राफ में,
हजारों साल से चूता, तो
और
बेटा दरिद्र
वही
कहाँ से
कंटिन्यू,
हुए हो हम?
दूसरे और तीसरे पैराग्राफ में ये लिखते थे कि ब्राह्मणों ने बहुत एक्सप्लॉइट किया। मैं कहा एक बताओ, मतलब ये गजब सा
या
परिश्रम
तो वो
था कि
दरिद्र
एक
है, नहीं
दरिद्र
तो
आदमी
एक्सप्लॉइटर है, दोनों
पूरे
में।
गांव को सता के रखता था और बाकी लोग कुछ बोलते नहीं थे। तो ये थोड़ा मतलब कॉन्ट्राडिक्ट करने वाला अपने आप को ये स्टेटमेंट्स ये
देखिए
जो
बेसिकली वो
लिखते
इसलिए
थे।
कहा जाता है ना, कॉक कॉक एंड बुल स्टोरी कैसे आता है कि जब आप इस किस्म का नैरेटिव बनाते हैं जो कि ऑर्गेनिक नहीं होता, जिसका लॉजिक नहीं है। ब्राह्मण दरिद्र है और ब्राह्मण आतताई भी है। तो प्रवीण सर आप बताइए कि आज अदानी जाएगा प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफिस में, उसकी सुनी जाएगी, या मेरे घर के सामने एक दरिद्र भिखारी है वो जाके क्या कहते हैं 7 रोज के कोर्स के सामने बोलेगा, भाई मैं ओझा हूं, मैं स्वयं सो जाति का हूं, लेकिन मैं भिखारी हूं। अभी के अभी नरेंद्र मोदी जो ओबीसी कास्ट के हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर है मेरे सामने प्रस्तुत हो और मेरा पॉलिसी सुने। क्या ये हो सकता है? क्या ये संभव है?
बोली नहीं
तो
है।
जो भी गवर्नमेंट ऑफ द डे पावर्स दैट भी है, तो वो उसी के पास जाएगा जिसके पास अर्थ और प्रोडक्ट सेंटर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन। सेंटर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन हमेशा हमारे सो कॉल्ड शूद्र जाति के पास रहा है। इसीलिए डिवीजन ऑफ लेबर में उनको कर्मकांड से छुट्टी दी गई। अगर आप दंड न्यायिका देखें, ब्राह्मणों के लिए हार्शेस्ट पॉसिबल पनिशमेंट फॉर एनीथिंग। शूद्र अगर मदिरा पान कर ले तो शूद्र को एक साधारण तर्पण, क्या कहते हैं, पश्चाताप और प्रायश्चित से जाना पड़ता था। एक ब्राह्मण मदिरा पान कर ले तो उसको अपने पितरों के तर्पण से वंचित कर दिया जाता था जीवन पर्यंत, जब तक कि भयंकर पश्चाताप नहीं करता था। शूद्र अगर किसी की चोरी कर ले या किसी का सामान रख ले, क्योंकि वो ट्रांजैक्शन कर रहा है ना, सामान ले रहा दे रहा है, अगर वो रख ले और किसी ने उसके ऊपर ब्लेम कर दिया तो उसको दंड दिया जाता था इन टर्म्स ऑफ फाइन्स। ब्राह्मण अगर किसी के यहाँ चोरी कर ले तो सूली की सजा थी। दैट मीन समथिंग विल गो राइट फ्रॉम द लोअर हाफ ऑफ हिज बॉडी एंड पेनिट्रेट एंड कम आउट थ्रू स्कल। जो व्लाद द इम्पेलर का पनिशमेंट है, उतना भयानक पनिशमेंट ब्राह्मणों के लिए दिया गया है। एक तो तुम दरिद्र हो, एक तुम्हारे पास कोई सोर्स ऑफ इनकम तुम नहीं रख सकते, एक तुम क्या कहते हैं कोई पक्के घर में नहीं रह सकते, और तुम हो गया आतताई, ना तुम्हारे पास पॉलिटिकल पावर है। इट डजेंट सिंपली एड अप, और इन चीजों का कोई मतलब ही समझ में नहीं आता है। तो इसी तरीके से हमेशा नैरेटिव चेंज की गई है, नैरेटिव डिस्टॉर्ट किया गया। तो जिन लोगों को नुकसान हुआ
One last
अंग्रेजी पॉलिसी।
one last question before we wrap this up.
Let me sum up the first question.
Sure.
One, those people who actually revolted were the interest who were hurt. So they were the producer. जुलाहों के हाथ काटे गए वो लोग रिवोल्ट किए। लकड़ क्या कहते हैं, लकड़हारा जो बढ़ई मिस्त्री हैं उनके लकड़ियों पे टैक्स लगा गया, उन्होंने रिवोल्ट किए। शमशान घाट की भूमियों को कलेक्ट कर दी गया, और आदिवासी जिसकी बात कर रहा है, ब्रिटिशर ने सबसे बुरा फॉरेस्ट एक्ट पास करके पूरे के पूरे आदिवासी समाज को क्रिमिनलाइज कर दिया। और उसने एक किताब निकली, द क्रिमिनल ट्राइब्स ऑफ इंडिया, आपको मिल जाएगी बाद में इतिहास। सो इट वाज द ब्रिटिश पॉलिसी विच ड्रोव दिस पीपल टू रिवोल्ट। हथियार, अगर मान लीजिए ब्राह्मण को हथियार चलाने आने के लिए तो उसको ट्रेनिंग देनी पड़ेगी, लेकिन जो लोहार दिन रात तलवार बना रहा है, ही मस्ट बी टेस्टिंग हिज वेपन्स, तो उसको अच्छी तरह से मालूम है, क्षत्रिय चलाना जानता है। तो जब एक सोशल रिवोल्ट शुरू हुआ, ये रोटी कमल हो गया, ये हो गया, इट वॉज प्रिडोमिनेटली पीपल हु विल हैव अ वेस्टेड एंगर। अब ब्राह्मण क्या था, पढ़ा लिखा था, तो उसको एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव पोस्ट में डाल देते थे। वो पुराने जमाने में भी बही खाता घिसता था, एक ना एक मुसलमान रूलर के लिए, कभी हिंदू रूलर के लिए, अब क्रिश्चियन रूलर के लिए। तो उसका स्टेक बहुत कम था। बाद में भले ही उन लोगों ने बोला कि ये मैं समाज के ऊपर अपमान नहीं बर्दाश्त करूं, उन लोगों ने भी पार्टिसिपेट किया। लिखा किन लोगों ने, इतिहास कम्युनिस्टों ने लिखा है, रोमिला थापर ने लिखा, और उन्हीं लोगों ने डिनाई किया है इन लोगों को स्पेस, और पूरे जो फैक्ट है उसको इन्वर्ट कर दी। जिन लोगों का इंटरेस्ट हट किया उन लोगों ने रिवोल्ट किया। तो रिवोल्ट करने वाले कौन थे? वक्त खां था, तांतियां टोपे था, हाँ, ये थे, मतलब ये राजा सिर्फ नहीं थे, इनके जनरल जनताओं ने सबवर्सिव एक्टिविटीज की थी, इनके खिलाफ बगावत की थी ब्रिटिशर्स ने। इसलिए ब्रिटिशर्स दे वर वेरी फ्रेंडली विद द अपर क्लास, दे वर वेरी वेरी हार्श विद द लोअर क्लास हु वर रिवोल्टिंग। अब इनको बोलेंगे कि इतिहास में कहीं लिखा नहीं गया, लिखा तो भाई तुमने था। शुरुआत से अबुल कलाम आजाद को
यहाँ
तुमने
यहाँ एक
बनाया, क्या
प्रश्न
कहते
आता है दादा,
हैं,
how much was Nehru responsible for this?
Nehru was the biggest subversive agent which was put after Muhammad Karim, aka Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. And he was basically a pedophile homosexual, and who he was basically also let us say turnkey person who was guising as a pandit, but he had absolutely no knowledge of anything of being Brahmin, and he has accepted such in his own autobiography, where he says, "I am Muslim by faith, Christian by actions, dress, and Hindu by accidental birth." His birth may be accidental, but he was never a Hindu. That much we can be sure of. So these people had cheated India from beginning. The basic conception was Operation Madhouse, which was proposed by the outgoing viceroy. Then they proposed the Operation Balkan, which was equally thwarted by both Nehru and Jinnah. And lastly was the trisection, which went into the vivisection of the country. So it was always aimed at the Hindu, let us say, the producer class or the majority. So the majority, you see, any kind of ruler from indirect rule, he will always like to co-opt or cohort with the aristocracy, and he will basically suppress the serfs, because that was the culture in Europe. यूरोप में क्या था कि कभी भी राजा जब जीत जाता था तो सर काट देते थे एम्परर का, तो क्या करते थे, उसी के नोबलमैन सर्फ को अपने सेना में शामिल कर लेते थे। सर्फ क्या देखता था, इधर देखता था, उधर देखता था, राजा बदल लेता था, उसको कोई फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता था। मरता कौन था? जो सैनिक जमीन पे लड़ रहा है, तो वो सैनिक कौन था? सैनिक तो समाज के निचले वर्ग से, सो कॉल्ड जाति के निचले वर्ग से थे। तो अगर आप धर्म, हिंदू धर्म की अगर वर्ण व्यवस्था देखें, ऑल दीज पीपल, वो बताया जा रहा प्रोहिबिशन था, वो बेसिकली प्रोहिबिशन के जगह एग्जेम्पशन था। हिंदू ब्राह्मण जो है बिना त्रिकाल संध्या के भोजन ग्रहण नहीं कर सकता था। थोड़ा भी गंदा हो जाए उसको 3 बार जाके नहाना पड़ सकता था। उसको हमेशा पठन पाठन में ही रहना पड़ता था, वो कोई प्रोफेशन नहीं कर सकता था, बिकॉज ही वाज सपोज्ड टू बी ब्रेव। अब क्या हो गया, शूद्र को इन सारी चीजों से एग्जेम्पशन था, बिकॉज ही वाज द प्रोड्यूसर ऑफ द इकोनॉमी, वो लिंच पिन था इकोनॉमी से। तो अब नाउ कमिंग बैक टू द फैक्ट, the entire independence movement, entire social movement against the British, entire thing was driven by the Dalits. The history has been written by Congress, and now they are blaming the entire population of the present government and the entire dispensation for writing a history which they have written. Now things cannot be more perverse or more inverted, and person should basically challenge that who had made the first history committee, who was Romila Thapar, whose commission was given, and who had written the history. It is you, your grandfather, your Khandan had written everything. You had written garbage. Thanks for acknowledging that it is garbage. You are acknowledging that garbage is willfully written, and it has not recognized the true stakeholder of the independence movement and the true stakeholder of our social revolution, the Dalit, and it is about time that you tell at least literate people from your Congress, which is very few and disparaging as of today's collection, like Shashi Tharoor, to do the proper history writing. The education ministry will consider and put their books in syllabus. So, right, all this nonsense is only to do rebel.
ठीक है दादा.
Yeah, so it is incumbent on today's Congress that they correct their historical mistakes, come to terms with what nonsense they have done in duping and subverting the history of India, that is murder of history. As Pakistani intellectuals have come to the fact that ISI has subverted their history, and they have written a book called The Murder of History in Pakistan. So it is high time that we also get away from political correctness and say Congress has done murder of history and they are solely responsible, and we should use Rahul Gandhi's statement as a testament of acknowledgement of mistake and acknowledgement of let us say distortion of history which the Congress has carried out, and we should now start digging out and teaching the people who are the true freedom fighters, not those people who had done experiment on brahmacharya, not those people who had done wheeling dealing and done transfer of power with the British, not those people who were basically sycophants and were trading, let us say, insults and injuries with the rulers in order to get more brownie points and garner more part of the pie. The real stakeholders were at that time, the classes of the Hindu society which were being trampled, and also certain significant classes of the Muslim society. The Muslim aristocracy hijacked the freedom movement and created Pakistan, and they have made a mess out of that country, and they have basically driven their country to impoverishment. The people of Pakistan have realized today that the Sultanate-e-Mustafa they had dreamed has turned out to be the worst possible nightmare manifested. And it is time for the Hindus of India to awaken to the fact that what Congress has done is nothing but historical genocide and apartheid against the general classes with pathological hatred from against the intellectuals, intelligentsia. So, doing course correction, I acknowledge what Mr. Rahul Gandhi is saying in spirit, that the real stakeholders like Birsa Munda, the real stakeholders like the Adivasis who have revolted, the real stakeholders like the Thagi cult should be now decriminalized and reinstituted as the real heroes of India who had brought freedom by persistent, prolonged warfare against a ruthless and heartless empire. And do course correction. Now coming to the second question, Dada, the Joshua project. The Joshua project is an OSINT-sponsored extreme fringe, let us say, section of Christianity, which has their very separate churches, which has some alliance with the Orthodox, with the, let us say, Catholic Christianity, which is there in India. It must be accepted that India is the only country where all sections of Islam and all sections of Christianity and the Judaism in all its form is flourishing without any problem or any restraint, and all people have their individual places of worship, which is being maintained at the cost of Hindu temples through the Hindu Temple Act. The money from the Hindu devotion and the Hindu funds are being collected from temple, and all these various faiths are being maintained at our cost. This is a matter of separate discussion. Now, what the Joshua project and this rhetoric is very simple. They are very much aware that the entire body is an organic whole of a society. So if you do decapitation and you sever the head from the body dies a natural death. So the Hindus being the head of the society that is not having any center of production, but the center of strategy, learning and awakening, if they can be demonized and ideologically, let us say, villainized from the rest of the population, the very fact that all the rituals they perform through the halo effect will automatically be demonized, and the very fact of performing rituals, giving obedience to our ancestors and doing the practices of our religion will fall into disarray and dispractice and hatred, because Brahman is basically known for a person who's maintaining the religion. So villainize the Brahmin through anti-Brahminical atrocity literature and create identity, create the narrative of the uh, exploitative and greedy Brahmin and the ruthless Baniya and the Atyachari Kshatriya, and then you make the Shudra and everybody basically despot, sorry, say, rather what I would say as victim, that it will create an us in them kind of narrative, and when will lead to total fragmentation and annihilation of Hindu society and faith as well. That is the main project, and it is supported by OSINT, and the concept is very, very simple. The Hindu upper classes are now today marginalized due to low rate of reproduction. In fact, decreasing rate of reproduction at 1.8 ratio of 1.8 to 1.1, and for upper classes it is as low as 0.8, 0.1. So you will be seeing that the Hindu Brahmin population, the Dikshitars and all micro minority communities are shrinking at a rapid pace. So it's so fast that they are shrinking at a pace faster than the Parsis. And we are not having enough, let us say, population for the next generation to fill up the vote bank gap. While the Muslim reproduction rate stands at 3.4 to 2.5, 2.5 to the homegrown Muslim population and 3.8 to the immigrant Bangladeshi and Rohingya population. And they're filling up this vacuum and creating a population inversion, a demographic inversion, along with the immigrant other faces. And these people are ready to change faith at any time. The reason for Joshua Project attack on India, the Catholic Church and Orthodox in Russia is massively losing subscription due to lack of faith and lack of traction along with the youth of that country, which has gone into permanent moral panic and debauchery. Their society is being flooded by all kinds of ideology which is contrary to their belief system, like homosexuality, LGBT, queer system, and others, which is challenging the long-standing concept and the faith of their Christian religion, which was basically towards celibacy, towards renouncement and others for the priests and other holy section, and a devout commitment to a single Lord. Now, demon worshipping, all kinds of heavy metal music and other things have pervaded the society, and debauchery and moral decadence have engulfed the entire American South and the European West, due to which their civilization is coming to a natural death and it is in steep decline, along with the subscription of the faith. So, if a church loses subscription and the people are not going to the church, they are no longer professing the faith, where do you get people? They know that traditionally Indians are very religious in nature, so they are now feeding on our soul. They have launched a modern warfare, or what we call a cognitive warfare on the Hindu population, which is very akin to what people would say Brigadier General S.K. Malik's book, a Quranic concept of warfare is there. They are not coming only for your property. They are not coming for your woman. They are coming for your soul. They want to convert you and they want to make you their one, so that you join the tormentor and become the tormentor yourself. So this is the Joshua project. their main focus is the majority of the Hindu section, which is obviously by the demographics is the lower part of the Hindu society, so-called lower, but the west, the religiously the Shudras, Atishudras, and the tribals and the scheduled tribes. And now they are being targeted for conversion through allurement as well as force and through ideological movements such as the extreme left and let us say fear, enticement, and everything together. And they are being given misrepresentation against by the anti-Brahminical literature, which is all pervasive because the upper classes have been so badly impoverished. Our ability to produce books and literature of our own has been greatly diminished. So much so that the international publication houses have created an ideological apartheid against Indian writers or Indian ideological writers who are writing the fact. So all books of Indology have only one qualification: the Indology writer cannot be Indian. You will be surprised to know that. It has to be a German, European, or anybody Japanese from another person who will do a dissection of the Hindu faith, and he will explain to you what being Indian means to an Indian. So things cannot be more warped. So the literature which is present in the market, syllabus, and educational system is all from the left section of the ideology, left and extreme left, and the center left, and it demonizes the Brahmins. And this is how they create an ideological rift. They bring even my maid servant who was working in Bombay. She is having all the Hindu name, and they have been converted to Christos. And every Sunday she needs a rest because she goes to the church and cooks for the full church in free. While if my family comes and any extra work has to be done, she is not totally upset, and some amount of bakshish or compensation or overtime has to be paid to a highly paid, let us say, domestic help who comes for about 2 hours a day. So this is the state of mindset which they have been made, and that mindset comes from the fact that they have been taught, like anti-Semitism or Nazi movement in Germany, that the reason for all misery of all Germans is the Jew who is a wealthy Jew. So very, very similarly, this Nazism or this fascism has been packed by the Antifa against the Hindu Brahmin. And it has been basically done by the Joshua project, that each and every, let us say, sociological research from the ISSR, we are funding our own funeral by sponsoring Brahminical literature. The professors who are giving are basically from the same ideology. Who are awarding PhDs are from the same ideology. They write openly about LGBT and other things which has no coherence, cognizance with the Indian, let us say, practices of the. We are being ethnically cleansed. Today, the Brahmin and the general classes are being subjected to lawfare through concepts like the Scheduled Caste Act and others. Even domestic and let us say simple business rivalries or civil cases are being given scheduled caste cases in order to public vengeance. It has become a it's become a legal tool for misuse. Thereby, so much so that today the ethnic Brahman is thinking whether he should change his title by a court affidavit, basically sacrifice his, let us say, sacred thread, and take a different surname in order to avail the reservation quota. So this is a new kind of jizya of the modern world which is being launched against the Hindu upper classes. And I see dark days ahead unless and until the Hindu population awakens.
We are still paying the jizya for these threats.
Yes, we are paying jizya for the threats very, very severely. The 54% of the IIT seats are reserved for the other classes. And you being the general class, either you have to be extremely meritorious to get in, or somebody can just claim anything and get a fake LC certificate and take your seat. And after using the state infrastructure to learn engineering, you will be funded to do anti-Brahminical research in an MBA college in organizational behavior which has nothing to do with Brahmin or Dalit, but you are doing nonsense on that. So these kind of things are happening, and that is why Rahul Gandhi represents a present and persistent danger to the existence of Hindu society and the national integrity as a whole. People should unite, collect, agitate, activate, and circumvent and circumcise his activities. I use the last word with particular emphasis.
But I believe he's already circumcised.
No, he physically he is. His activities needs to be done the same.
All right. Thank you so much, Dada, for being with me today. I would love to have you once again, maybe later this week. For today, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back with you. Thank you.